On this episode of the Low Carb Cook, I'll be showing you one of my finest achievements, a really rich, sweet and crumbly short crust pastry perfect for all of your favourite desserts. Along with its savoury counterpart, I've made it a bit of a personal mission to figure out a recipe for the perfect rich short crust pastry, so I could bring back tarts and sweet pies to my low carb diet. This is one I was delighted to figure out, and in this episode I'll be sharing my own recipe with you so you can enjoy it too. On to the ingredients. For this recipe you'll want 50 grams of ground almond flour, 50 grams of vital wheat gluten, 50 grams of lupin flour. Now a lot of recipes call for coconut flour, but I don't like the taste and texture that adds into a dish, and lupin flour has the same 7.5 grams of net carbs per 100 grams as coconut flour, so it's a better ingredient in my opinion. I'm going to add 100 grams of granulated erythritol. Being granulated, that helps to stop it sinking when it goes in for its blind bake. Then I have just half a teaspoon of xanthan gum, a pinch of pink Himalayan salt, 100 grams of unsalted butter. I'm going to use about 10 ml of white cider vinegar. That's just to help this pastry stay nice and crisp. And then we're going to add 10 to 15 drops of stevia, depending on taste. And finally, I've just got some ice cold water to help blend this in the mixer. Now, if you have a lot of pies or tarts to make, you can always double, triple or quadruple this recipe as required, and it will keep in the fridge. But this will make enough for an 8-inch tart or something similar. Now this is the perfect recipe to make in the food processor if you have one, and I highly recommend you do. It's probably the second most used machine in my kitchen and incredibly helpful when you cook and bake as much as I do. And the method for this couldn't be simpler either. All we're going to do is throw in all of our dry ingredients. So that's the lupin flour, the almond flour, our vital wheat gluten. That's going to help it stay naturally stretchy like traditional pastry. Then we add our granulated erythritol. Now I've tried this with powdered erythritol, but it makes it sag when you do the blind bake, so I really recommend using granulated for this. Next we're going to add our teaspoon or half teaspoon of xanthan gum, then our pinch of pink Himalayan salt, and we are just going to blitz that up. Now blitzing this to start with is going to take down your almond flour until it's much finer, and you're not going to see all those little lumps of almond in your final pastry. So just let it blend that up for a moment. You can pulse the mixer if you need to. That just really helps to move things around. Make sure it's not settled. But there we are. That's looking much, much better. Now into the top of there, I'm going to start adding my butter. And straight away, you can see the difference that is making. You want cold butter for this. If it's too soft, it will simply melt into it. We don't want it to do that. Just let it blitz that for a minute. Let it really work that in. Again, pulse the mixer if you need to. And it's becoming more of a granulated texture. You can already see it starting to clump there. Next thing is that we're going to add about 10 ml, that's about 2 capfuls of apple cider vinegar. Now this stuff is anything but sweet smelling. It's quite a pungent aroma, but the good thing is once this is baked you really won't be able to taste this or smell this in the mix. And finally I'm just going to add in 10 to 15 drops of stevia. That's to help balance that erythritol. Now you can see this has turned into a very noisy ball. And you might think that's done, but we actually want to break this down. We want to make it softer to start with. So I'm going to add some water slowly. I want it to turn into a paste in the machine, a real paste that you can see being whipped up. There we go, a little more water. There, that's it. Because in a moment we're going to wrap this up and then it's going to go in the fridge for about half an hour to an hour, and that's going to absorb all of that moisture out of it and become a much firmer paste. So we want to start with something that's a little bit softer. That's looking really good. We'll just make a bit of space. I'm just going to have some cling film ready for when this comes out. There we go. There, that's looking really great. So I've got my scraper and I'm just going to scrape all of that off onto my waiting cling film. So you can see in there, this really is much more gooey than you'd expect from a normal pastry, but when this comes out of the fridge after it's had time to relax, it's going to be much more solid. There we are. Now, little pastry making tip for you. If you need this quicker than, say, an hour, if you flatten that out, make it really thin, that's going to chill down and relax much more quickly in your fridge. So that'll be ready for you sooner. Now we are just going to wrap it up, seal it up, and as I say, all that moisture is going to get absorbed, so it's going to thicken up in the fridge. And we're going to pop that into a cold fridge for about half an hour to an hour until it's ready to use. Welcome back. So our pastry has been chilling in the fridge for over an hour now, and that's absorbed all of that moisture and is a lot less sticky and definitely ready to roll. Now I'm going to be using loop-in flour to stop this sticking to the work surface and to my rolling pin. Just pull that out of there. Now before we start rolling this out, we're just going to turn our oven on to 140 degrees centigrade, getting ready to do our blind bake. Now, it's really important with this to keep dusting it and also dust the rolling pin. Now, if you're like me and you do traditional baking as well, if you ever use marzipan or fondant icing, it's really important to keep those evenly thick. So I use these fantastic little silicone guides on my rolling pin, and they just help to make sure that I'm rolling things out evenly. It's a bit of a cheat, but you know what? Why not? If it works at the end of the day, that's the result that you want. So that's my pastry ready. I'm going to be using this little 8-inch scalloped tart pan with a loose bottom. That's just going to help us remove it at the end. And to help get that out, I'm going to spray that with some coconut oil to start with, just inside. That's going to help it release after it's baked. So have that to the side ready. It's really going to help you when you have to slip this underneath it. And then just start evenly rolling it. Now if it starts to crack, it actually means it's a little bit too cold. So don't be afraid to handle it a little bit, let it warm up a little bit, just till it becomes more pliable. And if it still is a real mess, just roll it all up again and start again. That's fine. That's the wonder of pastry. Just keep turning it, keep dusting it. You can see this is just as flexible as a traditional pastry and works just as well. It's not crumbly like many other alternatives using coconut flour that I've tried. There. That's rolled out large enough. It's to about 4 mil thickness. So now I'm just really carefully going to put my tin underneath, guide that over. And I'm going to very carefully, I don't want to squash it down into the tin. I don't want to break it if I can help it. So I'm going to work very carefully around it, just gently lowering the edges into the scallop shape of the tin. If it does crack or it does break, don't worry, that's fine. You can just add a piece in and blend that in. There we go, working our way around. Don't press it in too hard, you don't need to do that either. It's a bit of a delicate operation, but just take your time over this. It's definitely worth doing that. You can see that pastry starting to take on the shape there of that scalloped edge. But that's nice. A lot of keto foods that you see online seem to be rushed and put together, and people take the attractiveness out of the food. We're trying to bring back some nice looking food for people to eat. So that decorative edge just adds that nice little touch to it. Okay, that's laid in quite nicely. So I'm just going to roll my pin over the top of that. There. Now these pieces, these are going to keep really well in the fridge, so you can just wrap that up again in some cling film and use that again for something else. And there is our perfectly lined tart dish. And all I'm going to do next, take a fork and just prick some holes in the base. That just means if there's any trapped air underneath, it's not going to inflate and blow up while it's in the oven for its blind bake. Now you can, if you want to, pop this back in the fridge for 15 minutes just to rest again, cool down. That'll help stop it slumping on the sides. I'm just going to pop this straight into the oven now, remember 140 degrees for about 10-15 minutes just to part bake through. And there is our buzzer, so that must be ready. Let's pull it out and take a look. Yes. There is our absolutely perfect sweet shortcrust pastry case base, ready to make some absolutely delicious dessert. And if you want to see what I do with this exact one, well, check out my tart of citron video here on the channel. Link to that in the description. But this video is just to show you how to make my amazing pastry to prepare and fill. Now, I also have a savory version of this pastry, which is ideal for quiche and other dishes. Check that out, there'll be a link in the description as well. But if you've enjoyed this video and you'd like to see some more from the Low Carb Cook, just ding that bell to be notified of new low carb and keto everyday recipes as they get uploaded. Thanks for watching, I'll see you again next time.
Hey, thanks for watching The Low Carb Cook. If you enjoyed this episode, why not watch one of our playlists or this recommended video? Click on the logo below to subscribe. Join us on any of our social pages, or if you'd like to show a bit more love, you can support the channel on buymeacoffee.com using the link below. For even more great stuff, check out the website, thelowcarbcook.com.